Okay, good evening and welcome, everyone. This is the April 23rd, 2018 public hearing of the Finance and Warrant Commission. Calling the meeting to order. Westwood Media Center is here, and we grant them permission to tape the meeting. Is there anyone else who would like to record the meeting? I see no affirmative responses. At this point, if I could ask everyone to rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. So at the request of the Board of Selectmen, we are having our third public hearing tonight with respect to the Islington Center redevelopment project. We are awaiting the arrival of the Board of Selectmen who, as I understand it, had a meeting starting at 6 or 6:30. So as we wait for them to join us, we will take advantage of the time we have to vote on some of the other articles that are before us, on which we've had a couple of hearings already. So we will start that work. We will work off the article listing that we have in front of us, and you have another description of all of those articles in front of you. So we'll start with number 1, supplemental appropriation FY18. Is there a motion on this article?
Motion to accept.
Is there, to approve?
To approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion on that? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining? See. That is a unanimous vote in favor. Moving to supplemental appropriation FY18, Article 2. Is there a motion on this article?
Moved.
To approve?
Move to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining? That's a unanimous vote in favor. Moving to Article 3, Town Operating Budgets for FY19. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion on this article? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining?
Abstain.
Abstain. One abstention. Otherwise, all in favor? Thank you. Moving to Article 4, appropriation for municipal capital improvements. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve. Second.
A motion to approve that's been seconded. Any further discussion on this article? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining? Unanimous vote in favor. Moving on to Article 5, appropriation for school capital improvements.
Motion to approve.
Second.
There's a motion to approve, it's been seconded. Any further discussion on this article? Seeing none? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining? Unanimous vote in favor. So moving on now to, we need to fix that light, don't we? Let's take a break and see, can we pull the, we can't.
That won't go any further.
Oh, okay.
It's an emergency exit.
Emergency exit.
Jennifer, do you want to sit over here?
Yeah.
Yeah. You're really bearing the
I'm
brunt
like,
of it.
wow, I can't even see
Even at the
anything.
end of the
Yeah.
table, would that
Blinding.
work?
Yeah, she can sit over next to Tom. Is Cindy coming in or no?
Cindy coming?
Yeah, I haven't heard that anybody is.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, we'll Maybe by that time the
I
sun
was
will
just gonna
have
say,
come
give us a
down.
few minutes and it'll be okay.
Sit by
Yeah.
George.
Where is it warm?
I can move too.
What's that?
Tom,
Yeah, it's a little warm, yeah.
we can just switch you, okay?
Oh, thank you. Oh, my God, that's so much better.
All right.
It's not gonna last
I
very
know, I
long.
couldn't
It's
even
already
see
gotten a little
here.
better with it.
Mike, are we waiting for the selectmen? Yes. Okay. We can probably get, I just want to get her settled. Sure. Okay. So I think we can move on to Article 6, which are sewer capital improvements. Is there a motion?
Second?
Is there a motion first?
I'll make a
Motion approved.
Motion to approve, and a second?
Second?
Second. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed or abstaining? It's a unanimous vote in favor. Moving on to Article 7, other capital improvements. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve?
Second?
There's a motion to approve. It's been seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining? That's a unanimous vote in favor. Moving to Article 8, ambulance capital improvements.
Motion to approve?
Is there a second? There's a motion to approve. It's been seconded. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed or abstaining? That's a unanimous vote in favor. Moving to Article 9, the stabilization fund appropriation.
Motion to approve?
Second?
There's a motion to approve. It's been seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining? That's a unanimous vote in favor. Moving to Article 10, appropriation for the OPEB Liability Trust Fund for FY19. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion to approve?
Second.
There's a motion to approve. It's been seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining? That's a unanimous vote in favor. Now, we are still waiting for the Board of Selectmen to arrive in its entirety, I believe. Is that right? So we're going to pass over the Islington articles, which are 11, 12, and 13. Can we get started? Okay, great. So we'll now take a break from our voting and we'll move into the public hearing portion of our meeting tonight. I want to welcome Mike Gillette, Town Administrator, our Selectman, Mr. Walsh, Chairman Hickey, Nora Locknane, Economic Director, and Mr. Bailey, Attorney Bailey.
Thank you for having us.
Welcome.
So when we last spoke, we were still awaiting a host of data and details. Where we are this evening is, we can fill you in as to where we are in the process, where we are in terms of the land disposition agreement, and I refer to this team as the negotiating team, and they've done a great job and dedicated a lot of time to representing the town's interests. As we all know, it's a very dynamic and complex project with a host of data. I had reached out to the FinCom to ask for vote at a different time, but I think what would work best tonight is to kind of update you where we are and answer the questions that were asked at the prior meeting, if that works for you. So I suggest we turn it over to the negotiating team and let them update you.
Thank you.
Sure. Actually, I'm going to summarize the land disposition agreement, and I've got a term sheet, so I'll bring it in. George, if you could pass that out. If anybody is interested, there are others, in the audience, there are copies on the desk chair right there. By way of background, we've been working on a land disposition agreement for a few months. We did one of these when we did the land exchange for the police station. They're very commonly, it's commonly how municipal land is handled when you're doing land swaps. And this was all done, and this has all been in response to an RFP that was issued a couple of years ago. So just to summarize, the land transfers that we have 4 land transfers from the town to Petruzziello Properties. The existing municipal parking lot on Washington Street, part of that later gets transferred back to the town. We've got the Wentworth Hall parcel, which includes Wentworth Hall as well as some of the parking lot adjacent to the CVS. We've got the Islington Community Center parcel, and then we have a small frontage parcel adjacent to the ICC along East Street. It just extends along East Street. From Petruzziello to the town, this has changed from the last time. I don't know how much detail the FinCom got into this, but previously it had been separated into 2 lots. Now they've been just combined into 1 lot on the East Street side. It will be a part of the existing municipal parking lot and a portion of 2 adjacent residential lots. And this is the parcel that will be used for relocation and expansion of Wentworth Hall and for open space behind the residential properties on School Street and Schaefer Avenue. So the total land transfer in terms of acreage from the town to Petruzziello is 1.4 acres. From Petruzziello coming back to the town is 0.93 acres. So total net acreage being transferred to Petruzziello of a little over an acre, 0.55 acres. The most important part of, or at least maybe the most complicated part of the land transfer agreement is the phasing piece of it. We've got what we in real estate would call 3 different takedowns, phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. The reason it's set up that way is we've got to be able to continue to CVS wants to continue to operate its building until the new building is done. MMO wants to be able to continue its operations until their new building or their new facility is done, and the town needs to be able to operate town space in the ICC until new space is available. So that complicates things a bit. So the first phase is the town transfers the municipal parking lot on Washington Street to Petruzziello. Petruzziello then constructs the new CVS, a new parking lot, and reserves land for Wentworth Hall. So everything is on the East Street first phase, everything's on the East Street side of Washington Street. Phase 2, the town transfers the Wentworth parcel to Petruzziello. Petruzziello transfers the town parcel. Again, that's the combination of the former, the southern end of the, and we could show you plans, but we purposely said we weren't going to do another PowerPoint on you. The southern end of the municipal parking lot, and then pieces of the 2 adjacent residential lots come back to the town. Petruzziello then reconstructs the existing CVS for the MMO uses on the first level, on the ground level, and then for retail uses above. The town relocates Wentworth Hall to the opposite side of Washington Street and commences construction of the expanded Wentworth Hall, the town uses in the rear. And then phase 3 is the town transfers the ICC parcel and the East Street parcel, again the East Street is just a little sliver piece along East Street, to Petruzziello. The ICC is removed and a new mixed-use building is constructed by Petruzziello. I thought there might be some questions.
I have a couple. So on the land transfer, it's an acreage. Is this assuming that all acreage is of equal value? Or are there dollars tied to the value of the property that the town has given to Petruzziello and vice versa?
I mean, this is solely square footage, okay? I think, we'll get into dollars later. I mean,
But is that looked at all, or is it square footage to square footage? And no value to one piece of property is actually more valuable than another?
we have a draft appraisal, and definitely, different people, like the East Street sliver, that's
Right.
not worth much.
Right.
The ICC lot, probably is the most valuable. I think Mike or Michael could speak to that better than I could. But we,
Actually, it's the parking lot that's worth.
is it? Okay.
And then on the residential lots, there's no there's no homes, right? Those are,
They're selling
Yeah.
privately to the developer.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
And then, do we have a cost, assuming for the town to move Wentworth Hall to the opposite side of Washington Street?
We have an estimate of $3.5 million. That's to move it, to renovate it, and to put an addition on it.
And a basement,
Meeting
that's
space.
usable basement for meeting space.
You gonna continue through this?
Yep.
Thank you, those are just my few.
So on to second page. Timing. Okay, so we've got 3 different closings, and we've got outside closing dates for each item. If Petruzio fails to perform within those closing dates, then the agreement terminates. The Phase 1 closing is on or before January 1, 2019. Phase 2 closing is of course, now it gets a little trickier because everything keys off of the Phase 1 closing, but it's the earlier of 180 days after a certificate of occupancy for the new CVS, or 2 years after the Phase 1 closing. So, say Phase 1 closes November 1, 2018, gets built, as expected, your second closing either has to be within 180 days after that CVS gets built, or as an outside date, it would be November 1, 2020. And then a very similar principle for the Phase 3 closing, which is it's the earlier of 180 days after a certificate of occupancy for the renovated CVS building, okay, the one with MMO and the retail space, or 2 years after the Phase 2 closing. Okay. Each closing is subject to separate financing. Yellow properties will have to be able to finance each aspect of the transaction, each phase on its own. Money. Petruzziello has already paid a $50,000 deposit. That was with the RFP. That is credited against the purchase price at the Phase 3 closing, so not until the very end. This has been set up so that there are basically installment payments. There's $400,000 due at the Phase 1 closing. There's another $400,000 due at the Phase 2 closing. And the balance of the agreed-upon purchase price, and you'll hear from others about that in a few minutes, would be paid at the Phase 3 closing. One thing that we included in here is a provision that building permit fees, that to the extent that there are building permit fees that are in excess of what it costs the town to actually inspect the buildings and review plans and do all the usual building permit things. Normally those funds go into the general fund and would require a transfer. Here it's set up so that those building permit fees could be used to cover unanticipated costs or furniture, fixtures, and equipment, other things that might be necessary to finalize the new municipal space. The land disposition agreement is also consistent with the special permit with respect to affordable housing requirements. It requires that Petruzziello add one moderate or low-income unit to his existing apartment building at 321 Washington Street, and requires that he then make application to the state, to the Department of Housing and Community Development, so that all 16 units in that building would be counted as low or moderate income housing units on the subsidized housing inventory. For those of you that were around for University Station, it's very similar to what we did there under the state affordable housing guidelines. And apartment buildings, if 25% of the units are subsidized affordable housing units, then all the units in the building will count towards your...
Point out, sorry, you said 16 units, it's 12 units.
I'm sorry.
in that building.
12 units. And then there's an obligation to do 2 additional units, affordable units. It's kind of loosely drafted, but the expectation is that Petruzziello would do them in an existing building he has on Washington Street. And, that's what I have. Mary Ann, if you want to open it up for questions, or we can go on to, the next part.
Mary Ann, I have a question.
So you indicated under the phased closing, that they're all independently financed. So there's a possibility that we would do the phase one closing, phase one would go ahead, and then we wouldn't be able to get financing for phase two. What happens?
We have in the agreement that we still get the land for Wentworth Hall, so we're protected there. If phase two doesn't go forward, the developer is obligated to transfer that land back to the town, and then the rest of the deal, falls apart, and we've got $400,000. He's got a CVS, and we've got, we still have the ICC and.
And the MMO.
And the Wentworth Hall parcel,
And the Wentworth Hall parcel. Both parcels.
yes,
Marianne? Not the municipal lot.
not the municipal lot. We got a piece of
We
it
would have
back.
a new municipal lot.
Yeah, the new municipal lot.
Which is actually larger than the existing. So
And
we'd
the-
actually have more land developed as a municipal lot with a pad for receiving the Wentworth Hall if we chose to still go ahead and move it. And we have $400,000 above that.
And the timing on the affordable housing, if phase one only happens, when does the affordable housing,
The 12 units at 321 Washington Street would have to be listed prior to the first closing.
prior to the first closing? Okay. And the 2 additional units,
The 2 additional units would be in phase 3
Phase
because
three.
they're needed only upon construction of the 18 condominiums that are
Okay, so
proposed in the deal.
the 2 additional units are not likely to be in the next census.
They are not, no.
They're there for 2030.
That's right, because they would be covering the 18 condos. Which also wouldn't be counted in the 2020 census.
Dan, are you or someone else prepared to talk about the assessment as it pertains to purchase price?
Mike will speak to that.
Any other questions for Mr. Bailey before we move on? I don't mean to
Yeah,
usurp your presentation plan here, but it seems like a logical next step.
And,
Okay.
sorry, the open space and the residential properties that Petruzziello is giving to the town, that's happening before phase one, or during phase one?
You receive the land during phase 2, but if only phase 1 goes forward, we receive the land upon termination of the rest of the deal.
So that includes the open space?
It's
Okay.
one lot now. When we last came to talk to you, it was 2 separate lots. It's now one.
Wow, okay. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm gonna present on 2 aspects of this project. One is the soil samples, that we, on the soil samples that we received, and what was determined, and then on the valuation. The first is the soil samples. In a land disposition agreement, the parties have agreed that the responsible party for the disposition or reclamation of the soils so they can construct their buildings is determined by who's building the building and who's going to ultimately own the land. So in other words, we have these transfers of half of the parking lot and then a retransfer of half the parking lot back to the town. So that half of the parking lot and the part of the Cohen property where the parking lot's going to extend onto, and some of the building, we're responsible for any reclamation of the land below. Since we're going to put a foundation in, a deep foundation, because we want to make that usable space for meetings, that's going to cause a lot of soil that has to be disposed of in some manner. So the concern that we had was, is that going to be, how expensive is that going to be as a former gas station property? So we had the test run. We got a verbal today. Will soon be followed up by the end of the week, I think, with a written report. And what the conclusions were favorable. The land, there's some of the land that needs to be disposed of. It's primarily is, in layman's terms, is fill that includes ash product, and that ash product land cannot be reused in some other form, so it has to be disposed of. And then the rest of it can be put onto lands that are of similar type to what we're disposing of on this property. And the hope is that we can avoid any cost with regard to that and put it on some land that the town owns, and have it disposed of in that way. And if we can't, I think the cost is $25 a ton. So depending on how this all works out, it's the cost of getting the soil out of there is $40,000 to as high as $120,000. So it's in that range, and we do everything possible to get that down to the minimum amount. So that's not what we were fearing. It's more what we hoped for in the way of getting rid of the land. So this project, from that point of view, is something that we could go forward with.
Can I ask a question now? But if you discover something during construction that was unanticipated, that liability still can flow to the town, correct?
That's correct.
So there is an exposure there.
There is. But we hope, we believe, we did sufficient testing, enough drilling on the property that we.
I know, but on the fire station, didn't we have the same problem where you encountered stuff that we didn't think we were going to encounter?
On the fire station, it wasn't soils, it was.
Asbestos?
No, well, there was asbestos too, yes. Underneath the building, there was an asbestos problem, and the other problem we ran into with the fire station was utilities, pipes, and things like that.
But on the land that the town is transferring, if indeed there was something nasty discovered on that land, doesn't that liability can still flow back to the town?
No, the agreement is.
No, I know the agreement, but I thought,
Well,
you can't ask the lawyers, I thought that liability could still flow to the town no matter what agreements we sign.
No, you're absolutely right, George. If there's an agreement where you're getting a release and the builder goes bust and that soil has to be remediated, then it would be the town's responsibility as the owner. But remember that this is an old gas station that was contaminated, and that Texaco, the prior owner, did the assessment and remediation necessary to close it out under state requirements. So it's a fully compliant site. The issue here, as is often is when you're doing redevelopment, is you've got soils that once you dig them up, you really can't reuse them for other things.
So the 40 to 100 and was it $10,000 range, whose side is that on? Is that that's the town cost? So that's got to be, okay.
And so the testing that we did was only in the properties that we would be getting back as we enter the second phase.
Okay.
The developer did testing on his portion of the land that he's taking from us.
Okay.
Do we know the results of that by chance?
But we feel it must be pretty good because the developer is still in the project.
Will we get that before closing, so we at least know the liability? Who's going to fall?
Do you have any results do you want to speak to, Georgia?
The Cafe Diva site?
Yes.
The Cafe Diva site and then the site we're putting 20 in, so those are already financed in the bank as well, so those are 100%.
Any other questions on this piece, the soil piece? We might have some more as we go
Yep.
along.
So on the land disposition, on the valuation, as we explained before, we had not done a valuation of the property until such time as we got into a discussion with the developer. And he had a price he was putting on the table and said that if we wanted to have anything more than that, we have to show him a value that was better than what he was offering. And so we hired an appraiser to conduct a property evaluation. Now, as was explained, the land disposition agreement has the project in 3 phases. We will get money at the end at the beginning of the first phase, at the beginning of the second phase, and then we'll get money at the end, at the beginning of the third phase, when we transfer the ownership of the ICC over to the developer. That's when the settlement of the land, of the value will come into being. What was agreed upon with the developer is that we would, in that period of time, which is roughly 3 years from now, we would conduct another valuation appraisal. The developer would do one, or his bank, we would do one. If there was a dispute between the appraisals on the amount that they were suggesting was the value of the property, we'd have a third-party appraisal done of the value. It would be an appraiser selected jointly by the two, and we haven't come to final terms on exactly how we'd establish a price from there, but there'd be some procedure for arriving at a price that would be paid by the developer. The developer has agreed at this point to increase his payment to $2 million, which means that that's the floor on what will be paid to the town for the land that's being transferred. Again, I'll repeat, in the end, it's a half-acre of land that will be transferred between the town and the developer. That's where we are.
Tavern hasn't been mentioned tonight? The Tavern.
Tavern?
Yeah.
We haven't talked about the tavern. It's one of those issues that's off to the side.
Previous meetings, we talked about moving it to,
Yeah, so if I
Yeah.
could speak to that. The land disposition agreement and the plans that were approved by the planning board set out a lot on High Street that would be the home for the Blue Heart Tavern. Whether that would be owned by the developer, owned by a third party, or owned by the town, that remains to be determined. So the land disposition agreement has options for all three circumstances.
Yeah, you said
I'm sorry, Washington Street, right on Washington Street, immediately next to the Northeast Security Building, between that and where we would place Wentworth Hall. So there's in the plans that you have on the table, there's a lot that's carved out for that purposes. The first option is for the developer to choose to move and renovate and then lease that building on his own. The second option is to find some other private party that's interested in doing that. And if neither of those options go forward, then the town has the ability to do it, and the town receives the land, whether or not they choose to move and renovate the building. So it is addressed in the land disposition agreement, and it's addressed in the same manner in the planning board's special permit.
Is there any time frame on that?
There is. So the Blue Heart Tavern, a decision would have to be made on that before CVS could be constructed, because the location, the storage location, is in the way of CVS. So there's a period of time in the LDA that's based on if town meeting approves this project and then the Attorney General approves the articles, then there's a period of time after that final approval that it would have to be done, and it's a matter of, is it 10 days or 30 days? I don't know what
30 days after AG approval.
So it would be later this year, so sometime in the early fall.
I have a question on the finance, and I want to make sure, I know I've attended a lot of the planning board meetings, but before you got to the 2 million, the developer's offer was 1,750, is that correct?
$1,725,000.
Didn't we want to get it substantially higher than the 2 million? Didn't we want something like closer to 3?
So what we would like is $3.5 million, because that would fully cover the cost of all the work we need to do on Wentworth Hall. That's what we would like. The appraisals don't bear that out. So we have to, the developer is not willing to pay significantly above the value of the land that he's purchasing for the town. So if you might remember, I went through, the last time I was here, I went through some sample commercial properties in town and gave you the per acre value for those. And I can just repeat those. Roach Brothers is an example. The value of that is $263,000 per acre. And that compares with the value of this 0.55 acres that if we were to sell it to the developer for $2 million, that would value at $3.6 million per acre. Other properties to compare that to are the Eversource property, which is valued at $467,000 per acre, Wegmans, which is valued at $945,000 per acre, and the most expensive comparable we could find is the Target property, which is valued at just over $1 million per acre. So compare that to, even at $2 million, a value of $3.6 million per acre. So I think the developer is not, what I should say is the bank that is providing the financing for these projects would not approve financing that would allow him to pay more than
But
$3.6 million.
the shift I've seen is my understanding when the developer went from apartments to condominiums, which I think the town suggested it wanted, that mean he was gonna lower his revenue off. I mean, if I add these numbers up fast, I see the town maybe getting 2.8 million, but potentially dealing with costs somewhere between 3.5 and 3.7. If the soil is the worst case scenario, it's 3.5 to 3.6. And since we don't have any kind of real, all we have are estimates for Wentworth Hall. We don't have bids, so it really is a bit of a, I mean, I basically see $1 million issue here for the town in reality, because I thought you guys wanted to get the number higher.
We wanted to get the number as high as we could, but I think the one thing what I would offer is that the tax revenue that's going to be generated for the parcels once developed are sufficient that within 5 years we could pay, was it 5 years? We could pay for the full cost in addition that we would get, or we could finance a bond over 10 years and service a bond from the extra tax revenue for the first 10 years. So the project would pay for it, just from different buckets. Huh?
All that additional stuff would have been there anyways. I mean, what I'm saying is, I mean, if somebody asked me to summarize the deal, frankly, I mean, you're basically gonna go to town meeting, and you would be asking the town to appropriate, I'm not even sure 3.5 is the right number, somewhere maybe 3.750, under the assumption right now, we're sort of guaranteed, if everything goes right, 2.8 back. But the delta, I mean, there is a cost to the town of doing it. And
But isn't the extra cost also the cost if we brought the ICC up to code and did all the other work?
Bringing the ICC up to code was not even, you would spend $1.5 million to $2 million, and it was just be basically bring it up to code with a useless building. To fully renovate the ICC, you're probably talking $7+ million.
Right.
But I'm just saying that, I just want to make sure people understand the dynamics. If I just consolidate it down, because it's a lot of data here, is that I don't know when we're going to vote. I mean, are we also going to be able to see the agreement? Has the agreement been finalized yet?
No, it hasn't.
So the agreement's not been finalized, and I'm a little uncomfortable with the Phase 3 basically having this, it's $2 million now, but it may get better if there's future appraisal. I don't really see the appraisals changing all that much in 3 years. So I sort of view it as, I mean, I'm being very frank here, I see it as 2.8 right now, and the cost of the town is somewhere between 3.5 and 4. Maybe a wonderful project, but I think we got to put it in the right context as we go forward. Because I thought we were going to hear more from the developer today. I thought that was your goal last time we left here. So the 175 has gone to 2 million.
As I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, the LDA would not be signed off on, if you will, until after town meeting, assuming town meeting approves the articles.
Yeah, the selectmen don't have the authority to sign it until town meeting gives them the authority. But, I anticipate, we're pretty close. We've been back and forth with some very advanced drafts, and we certainly will have a final form of the LDA, I would think within a couple of weeks, but well before town meeting. And that will be available. I can't make it available until it's been finalized. It's a contract negotiation.
So where exactly is the Board of Selectmen with respect to this now?
They have not voted on it yet. They, like many of you are saying, we've decided we need more information before we're willing to make a recommendation to you as to where the Board of Selectmen stand. I can tell you that as probably the person who spent the most time on this who has been unpaid, we can say that this project has come a long way. The developer will tell you that, the first proposal he had, which offered more money, had a whole different picture to it. 28 apartments, it's now 18 condos. CVS with a drive-through, then the drive-through came off, then it went back up to 12,000, perhaps as high as 15,000. And they had a meeting with the neighbors, and that came back off, and CVS was actually present at the meeting. CVS took off the drive-through and took it under 10,000 square feet. All of those things play a part in, if you will, what the bank says we're willing to give to finance this project. The condos are flipping, and that's it once. The developer makes his money once. Apartments are the gift they keep on giving. So the bank takes a different approach to that. I understand that, from practice of law and having done real estate for a while, a long time ago, I do admit. But, those are the issues that the developer comes to us with, and we have at least created a project that I think the neighborhood, for the most part, I'll never say everyone, but for the most part, is more comfortable with and would be willing to do it. The problem clearly is the numbers. Do the numbers make sense for the town to do it? And that's where, we're still waiting for those final reports to be able to come to you and say, we've decided yes, we've decided no, here's what our issues are, and then present the best project we can to you for a decision, which will ultimately then go to town meeting.
Mike, what is the additional information you folks are waiting for?
Well, first would be the report from the, if you will, the testing that was done, where it was done. We'll have exact pinpoints to get an idea of, where that was on the property. Second is, the hardest thing on the appraisals is that most of the properties that the appraisers get to use are the ones that the developer has purchased. So it's kind of hard for any appraiser to go back and find something comparable, which the developer has not purchased and is more close in time to the actual cost.
The developer raised questions. The developer and the bank, his bank that's financing, raised questions about the appraisal. The appraiser was given those questions and is in the process of formulating a response to them. So we're still waiting for some finalization of those facts.
Mike?
I just wanted to ask a clarification question, because I want to make sure I understood what you guys said and what George said. The $2 million, is that the total value of the parcels we're transferring, or is that the final payment?
It's really both. So the RFP listed the total value of the four town properties as $1,975,000. We're giving the developer all four properties, then we're getting back almost an acre, 0.93 acres if we take the Blue Heart Tavern, 0.89 if we don't. So we're receiving land back, and we're receiving $2 million.
Right. So, George, you said 2.8 million. What were you thinking when you said 2. Well, I think the 2,400s are included in the
They're
two.
part of the $2
So
million.
we're getting a final payment of 1.2, assuming everything goes as court. So there's not 2.8, it's 2.
And that's even a larger
Right, no, that, exactly right.
Correct.
The delta's bigger than I think you were calculating.
And just if I may, Tom, before you jump in.
Oh, sure.
Part of the reason that we asked for a later appraisal is because the property that is going to be developed is going to increase the value of the land all by itself. So by doing it 2.5 years later, we could get much closer to the number that we're actually looking for. Depends, how the market holds up, how the condo market holds up. All of those things will be factors that go in at a later time. And because it's so far down the road, it's hard to say now what that property's going to be worth.
Got Howard and then Tom.
Actually, along those lines, in my business, I do a lot of phase deals, not real estate, but phase deals. I can't tell you how few of them actually don't go through without the subsequent phases being renegotiated. It's almost guaranteed. And what I've learned is to pay a lot of attention to phase one and make sure phase one stands on its own. And I won't say ignore the other phases, but does phase one, at the end of phase one here, he gets a parking lot, we get $400,000 in some affordable housing. Do I have that right?
And we get land.
And
So
we get-
Land is, we get
.89 or .93 acres. I would say if the deal falls apart, it's likely that we're taking the Blue Heart Tavern parcel as well. So it would be .93
It doesn't say that on here, so just.
Well, it says on here that you get that in the second phase, but there's language in the LDA that says if the project is terminated after the first phase, the town still gets the land it would have gotten in the second phase. So if that happened, if we only did phase one, the developer gets the land he needs to build CVS. We get the rest of that land on the School Street side of the property back. We get a paved parking lot on that land. We get $400,000 that we would use to design the Wentworth Hall relocation, whether or not we're going forward with that. And then we get about $131,000 in taxes new to the town that come off of the development of the CVS.
We get that $50,000 deposit too, if the other phases don't happen, or that.
So I don't know. I'll leave that to Dan to discuss.
Little detail, but anyway.
We're still discussing.
Yeah, okay.
Tom?
Okay. Just to follow up on a comment George made, if this project didn't go through, what would be the town's cost to bring up to standards current town-owned property on the site?
So it would be about $1.9 million to put a Band-Aid on the ICC and do basic renovations on the library building. If we wanted to do more than just keep the ICC running in the state that it's in now, if we want to actually renovate it so it's more useful, it's actually handicapped accessible and climate controlled, that would cost at least $4.9 million. And then add to that the other over $200,000 for the library building. So it's somewhere between $5.2 million is the high end to do a full renovation of both buildings, and $1.9 million is the low end.
Thank you.
And Mike, yeah, further, just to take that a step further, there's some question too, when you do the 1.9, based on the assessed value of the building, once you pass a third, you must comply and make the building fully handicapped accessible. So the 1.9 may not be the right number at all, but that's what we were given as to fix, what needed to be upgraded.
More closely to the 5 million.
Yeah, probably more likely.
Do we have a sense of what the net new tax revenue will be if we went through all phase three? It'd take us 5 years to.
That's right, and that's actually revised down from the last time I spoke to you, because when the CVS was reduced in size, the tax value also was reduced. So it went from, I don't have the number in front of me, I think it was about $475,000. That's the net revenue after we take out the cost for police, fire, and schools. It's now $427,000.
In what we're not getting today with any.
That's right. That's over and above what we get today. So right now, the tax value that we see of those properties is just over $68,000, and it would increase to $427,000. So if you look at it from the perspective of the town making an investment in some properties that it wants to keep in Islington, so whether it's making the investment in the existing ICC and the existing Wentworth Hall at its location, and that investment we just talked about that would be necessary would range from 1.9 to 5.1 million, or it's making an investment of whatever the developer's contribution does not cover for us to move, renovate, and relocate Wentworth Hall. In that case, the investment, if it's $3.5 million and we get $2 million from the developer, that leaves $1.5 million. Even if it cost us $4 million to do the project, then our investment is $2 million. Still well within the range of what we've talked about. But now we have the ability to get paid back for that in a period of 4 to 5 years by the new tax revenue that come from this project.
Yeah, so my question's regarding the appraisal. So a traditional residential appraisal is fairly straightforward. It's based on comps of like properties in the area. How is this commercial appraisal, how do they arrive at it? Because if it can't certainly be only based on simple square footage, bless you. Does it account for future revenues?
I believe that the values that were used here were based on similar acquisitions of parcels that were going to be subsequently, or that were subsequently redeveloped. and what was paid for those properties to do similar types of development. Some of them were in Dedham, some were right here. They were the purchase of the Washington Street parcels were factored into the values.
So only transaction prices, transaction price data, it didn't involve any future revenue stream at all.
No, because we didn't own all the parcels that would leave that revenue stream.
Okay. The only reason I asked that question is because obviously the value of that small strip of land on East Street and all, it obviously has inflated value based on the project as a whole. If one other person owned that, then, you know, it's the greatest value it has is to the developer, obviously, right? So, so obviously, therefore, it makes sense to pay more than square footage, you know, appraised value, because it makes sense to.
Right.
Otherwise, they wouldn't do it, right? So, okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. Jim, yeah, go ahead.
You talked about the increase in tax revenue. Did that include, I think earlier you mentioned that $400,000 did not include the loss of revenue from the ICC.
So the tax value is not the same as the revenue. Two different categories. I had included in there a sheet that showed the difference in the revenue that the town would receive. The town's current revenue is higher, but its value, the value of the buildings less the capital needs that go into that building, put us in a negative position as far as the value that the town has today. The tax revenue is separate from that receipt revenue, I guess I would say. The money that comes in the form of payments by MMO. So that's not included as money that would come in. What we're talking about is $427,000 per year just in new tax revenue after new expenses are accounted for.
Mike, when do you think the selectmen will be able to vote on this or make their final recommendation?
Well, we're trying to make the decision in time for your decision, so that's, we realize that, you know, books have to be printed and things have to be done, so we are putting our foot on the gas pedal to try to get everything done as soon as possible. It's gonna have to be before of May 1st, I think, so.
So we talked about additional tax revenue. I think we spoke last time about additional services, additional students. You had a kind of a net number that you thought that was. How much is that?
The 427 is the net number.
That is net
That
of
takes
all
out,
that.
that's right. There, you have a sheet in your packets that shows the breakdown. I believe the, I don't know the number off the top of my head, I think it was about $53,000 a year in cost for the town for educational, fire, and police services. That's deducted from the total estimated taxes for the property, and that's how we get to the $427,000.
I just want to make one point of clarification. On the ICC, on the revenue that we receive in rent and the expenses that we pay out, and expenses for heat, light, electricity, custodial services, basic maintenance, it's a wash. It's, you know, pretty much equal. Anything that goes wrong, we once had to fix the sewer system. We had a flooding issue. Anything that goes wrong like that, that's a net loss because we don't collect enough money to put anything aside. So ICC is more likely to cost us money than to generate revenue that's usable for anything else. That's the truth of it.
Could somebody speak to the CVS in a little more specificity? When we were here last, we still had the article before us, to allow for over 10,000 square feet. That's been withdrawn. What is the current status with respect to that?
So when we were here last time, there were two options that were on the table. One was a CVS of just over 13,000 square feet with no driveway, drive-through, or a CVS of just under 10,000 square feet with a drive-through. Neither of those options were something that residents were looking for, and the developer went back to CVS and negotiated a deal for a smaller CVS without a drive-through. So what we have now, and what's been granted a special permit by the planning board, is a 9,950,000 square foot CVS without a drive-through. And by reducing the size, it reduces the lease income for that property, and therefore reduces the tax, estimated taxes that the town would receive. So the numbers that I've given you tonight are updated to reflect that. The plans that you have before you are updated to reflect the new design of the smaller CVS without a drive-through.
And as a result of that change, there was once a warrant article that was proposed by the planning board to change the zoning to allow for a 15,000 square foot building. We've eliminated that article from consideration because it's under 10,000, which is allowed in that way.
What key members of FinCom do you have from the negotiating team and the selectmen before people on this committee feel comfortable making any kind of decision? And when do we want that data? I mean, I'm nervous over the fact that if there's let's assume we meet on May 1st, and that's when the selectmen are meeting. Are we give them enough time to absorb it?
Let me interject here, okay? So I received a communication from Chairman Hickey late last week explaining his concern that there would be additional information needed beyond tonight. And as a result of that, through Ms. O'Donnell polled the FinCom as to whether we could obtain a quorum for a further meeting at a later time if necessary. And we did do that, and Ms. O'Donnell worked very hard to try to secure a place for such a meeting. This is my concern, okay? We looked at, and we have deadlines to print the town meeting book that we are responsible for, and we have a duty to get it out by a certain date. So we're very concerned about that. We polled for April 30th and May 1st. I only have 8 people available on April 1st, May 1st, okay? And I have much greater numbers on Monday, April 30th. I am not willing to hold a meeting of FinCom, and you can vote me down on this, but I think that is too slim of a quorum to hold a meeting on something so important. So, you know, I think our only other option would be just to get to the end point, then we can back into it. You know, if we could meet on April 30th, we're going to need information from you before that date, if we're to make an informed decision.
Mary Ann, I absolutely agree with you. We can't do this with 8 people. That's not fair to the FinCom members, and I think it's such a critical issue in front of the town. That's why I'm asking the question. So let's assume we're meeting on the 30th. I want to understand what members here feel they have to have in front of them so that they feel they've had enough time to deliberate and can make a decision. You know, we spent 2.5 years on this, and I don't want to see it inadvertently rushed at the end. I mean, I think we owe the town a full analysis. So I just want to make sure, even the fact that Mike pointed out, I mean, I'm supposed to be in the middle of this, and all of a sudden I realize it's $2 million, not $2.8 million we're getting from them. So what do people want to see, and by when do we need it?
Maybe a way to back into that, George, is to ask a question of the selectmen for a moment, which is, what is the point at which you hope to get? You've said to us tonight, we're not ready to make a recommendation to you. I presume that you plan to make a vote on that once you get the additional information.
I do.
So maybe if we could get that from you, and then we could back into our discussion on this.
So I agree with you. There is a deadline. Right? We have May 30th set. There is a date. We have to go back into it. So the last possible date is April 30th. It is April 30th. And you know, the team, correct me if I'm wrong, but we have to present and be ready to give you information. So today is Tuesday. We can notice a meeting for tomorrow when we will meet prior to May 1st. I mean, I appreciate the additional data, I really do. I know how difficult scheduling is, but there is a deadline. I mean,
these are, busy people, and our schedule is set over the summer, for the whole year. So, folks, I think, have been really as accommodating as they can, but a lot of these folks travel.
Mike, Nora, we feel comfortable by the end of the week?
Yeah, we'll make it happen.
But when do we want information in our hands, Mary Ann? What I'm trying to avoid is stuff showing up at 6:45 on the night of April 30th. I'm trying to find out what do FinCom members need so they can come into that meeting and obviously ask some questions, but pretty much have a chance to digest the information.
Jim?
I can't, my biggest concern is our vetting process is typically a 3-month period from January through late April. And we've extended that. And even with the numbers, our vetting period is going now down to less than a week. On top of that, we're shutting out the public from their input. We'll have the information before them. They won't even have an opportunity to digest it. So I think everyone's being shortchanged at this point.
Oh, I would expect the selectmen's meeting, like I said, will be noticed tomorrow. We will find a date. There will be ample opportunity for public comment at our meeting. We will publish all of the information we have as quickly as possible. We've laid quite a bit of this out tonight. This really, I would remind everybody, when we talk about a vetting process, this RFP was initiated in 2015. We're ultimately talking about 7 parcels of land. And we have an opportunity to jointly develop those 7 parcels with the developer. We have gone through, I don't know how many iterations of what it ultimately will look like. We really are down to, the final costs at the end of a long project that are important. I don't want to minimize them. But the amount of due process and public input that this has received is really voluminous. And I don't think it's fair to characterize any of it as being shortchanged. So we will notice a meeting as quickly as possible. I do appreciate there's a deadline. There is a deadline, and we appreciate that, and we will publish as much information as we can as quickly as possible, and we will afford everybody who wants to speak on this at a selectmen's meeting that opportunity.
I disagree with that. You have had more information. You still have information that we don't have. If we had enough information, we would make the decision tonight. We could make the decision a month ago had we had the right information, or all the information. I'm not saying anyone's withholding it. I understand it's a large project. There are a lot of moving pieces. But to bring it down to a 7-day period, I don't think it's fair to the town. This is arguably the 2nd largest land deal in Islington. And University Station wasn't decided on 7 days.
But Jim, let me comment on that. I think that if you go through the planning board process, there's been, I think what we're down to basically the final economics of the deal. They have fully vetted, if you sat through all the planning board meetings as I have, and even with the Concom planning board. I think the aspect of what the project is as it evolved from apartments to condominiums and looking at the cost. I think the narrow issue here is, at the end of the day, if the town wants to do this trade, the town's got to appropriate X. The town's going to get a certain benefit, and the developer's going to get a certain benefit. I just want to be able to put in front of the town, in front of the FinCom, what's the total cost. So at the end of the day, if we have to appropriate $3.5 to $4 million in order for us to participate in this deal, and we get the library moved across the street, we get new space for youth and family services, and everything going on in the ICC. We avoid the cost of whether it's $2 million or $5 million at the ICC. At the end of the day, and also if you want to build in the 400 and some odd thousand of tax benefit, and that's the way we want to sell it, I want to put that in front of FinCom and in front of town meeting. So out of due respect, Jim, having sat through about 2.5 years of meetings, I think the FinCom probably is doing exactly what it needs to do, is zero in on a final economic case that will be put in front of the town with or without our approval.
Mike?
Yeah, I think I'm with you, George. I want to be even more specific. I think, I'm not suggesting you guys have to do this, but this would be useful for me. If this showed up a day before, this would be useful to me. I'd love to see a 2-page fact sheet. The first page would be how you guys assess the various economic benefits of it. So, the obvious tax benefits, the outflow, we're losing money from them, or whatever it may be. Line item it all out, the cost to move, the cost to remediate at its highest, most reasonably projected dollar amount. Just maybe the cost that we're saving from being able to put certain town functions into Wentworth Hall upon completion of the project. That would be one page. The second page to me would be qualitative things that we should all think about. You guys have been thinking about, and we've been thinking about, and the town's thinking about. So traffic, school-age kids, aesthetics, the sort of Damocles hanging overhead with the ICC forever, effectively. So all these qualitative things that we would take into consideration. I mean, if we had these two sheets in front of us when we voted, I think we could make an informed decision, and we would know we'd be hitting the checklist items.
I think that's a great suggestion.
Something like that.
Howard?
Just quick, I might be a broken record. I'd like to see phase one's economics broken out. Actually, break out all three, phase one.
I need to be longer than 2 pages then. but-
See what the tax revenue increase would be.
I was
if
proposing
only phase
2.5.
one happens, for example.
At the risk of, perseverating, we want to make the most fully informed decision we can on this. So when we hear you say we need to consider some further information that's coming in, I think we all hear that. We take it seriously, we take our vote very seriously. Having said that, I don't think we can meet any later than April 30th, which means you'll need to.
Have at least the Friday before to review it.
Yeah, we need, you'd need to meet that Friday, and then let us know after that. Let me just check in with members. What do you think about that as a general game plan?
I think it's very good. I'll give us, frankly, I like what Mike said, it focuses it. It allows us to make an informed decision, and then I think it lets us focus on a fairly precise discussion at town meeting, because we would have focused on the issues.
And the meeting would be a hearing. It would be posted as another public hearing.
Right.
Because we'd have further information, so that would be our fourth public hearing that we would have.
And I do hate to ask, I'm wondering if instead of 7, you could do 7:30, only in the event that we have to meet Monday. My only fear is that we have to meet Monday, so.
I think we can meet at 7:30.
Okay, I think that would
But
help.
we typically do, we had changed it to 7 because we were voting on everything.
Okay.
We will have voted on, I expect, everything else other than the Islington articles by that night.
It would still be helpful to get a two-pager ahead of time.
Yes.
Even if it
Yes.
was modified, it would be great to have that to look at.
Tom?
Yeah, just one quick clarification on, will the purchase price be hammered out by then, or will it just be an ask price that will be decided upon by then? Will the purchase price be agreed upon by next Monday, or would it be, or, I'll stop.
That's really what the selectmen have to decide. So we have the offer. The original offer was $1,725,000. The counter offer was $3.5 million. The revised offer is $2 million. The selectmen have to consider that offer. I think that's really the only piece of information you're looking for. I think you have answers to everything else that you asked for, but they're not in a summary sheet. So we will get them in a summary sheet. I think we have all those values, and I think we have in the last presentation, at the last meeting, I think I went through all the qualitative data. So it's just a matter of putting it in a summary sheet. We should be able to, yes, we should be able to get that to you without a problem.
Half hour before the meeting on the
Friday.
30th to get that.
The
So
only
we-
thing you're waiting for is the selectmen to consider the offer that's on the table of $2 million.
So we can provide all the data that you guys have asked for
Yeah.
in advance of that.
And you'll put in the developer's offer if it improves, then it's good news. So you just put in the worst-case scenario.
Okay.
I do understand the developer, Mr. Petruzziello, is here.
His attorney.
And with his counsel. I wanted to give you an opportunity if you wanted to say something, if you wish. I don't think you've been before us on a prior occasion. Welcome.
Thank you.
I'm not good at public speaking, but I just wanted to thank everybody. I know it's been a long process, like George said, it's been 2.5 years. And hopefully on April 30th, we come to some kind of a vote and agreement with the selectmen.
Thank you very much. Any other questions from FinCom at this point?
We're going to get a draft of disposition too.
Hopefully. I mean, I think, you know, I think we can get it done by the end of the week.
I want to open it up to residents for questions and comments. Yes, ma'am. And please make sure you get the microphone, and please say your name and where you live.
Yeah, used to this. Christine Privatera, 16 Dean Street. Is it my understanding then that the selectmen have to meet to determine the appraisals, values, et cetera, in order to present it to the FinCom? Correct? So there has to be a public hearing. Correct?
Correct.
Okay,
Not a public hearing.
Why?
On the 30th.
Huh?
Why not?
It's a public meeting, not a public hearing. There's a big difference between a public hearing and a public meeting. Public hearing, you'd have to advertise 14 days in advance. and things like
Okay. Now it's going to be a 48-hour, is that the?
48 hour.
48-hour.
notification.
And will it be this week or Monday?
Well, we'll find out tomorrow. I wish I knew
You
the
could,
schedule right now.
all right, well,
That's why I
it
asked
seems
the-
like,
I
yeah.
asked the FinCom to give me a little leeway on Monday because I just,
Yeah.
I know the
It seems like they won't have that much, whatever. Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Hi, my name's Joe Layden, and I live at 136 School Street. And I'd like to compliment the board. I saw a lot of questions that were probing and insightful, and gives me more confidence in the system than I came with. There's several items that, you know, they're small, but they're important. And this board, being a financial board, I would think would be interested in them. And if I can just run down them. One of them is the land values. I think there's a great disparity in the land values. The ICC sits at a very important place in Westwood, the 10,000 square feet of wetlands that you can't do anything with, and as a matter of fact, you have to maintain, that we're going to end up with, has a lot less value. I don't know if they use that 10,000 square feet as an equivalent value, but there certainly should be some adjustment for each of the individual lots, because there's a great disparity in value. The numbers that have been prepared, I brought these concerns up before. They show a nice return for the town. And to me, most of the return comes from the CVS building and comes from the other mixed-use office building. And not much of it comes from the ICC and library, because that's where all of the expenses we're going to incur are concerned. The service costs that they ascribe to the ICC building is roughly equivalent to the full cost of one family with 3 kids in school. We spend $13,000 a student. It's $39,000. We spend $3,300 an individual in town for other town services. And together, that would be $54,000 for that one family. And that's just about what they're ascribing to 18 condominiums with 18 second bedrooms, potential for 18 students. They say 3. There's no provision for anybody else to pick up that difference except for us. So I think that they haven't ascribed enough cost, provided enough cost for services for that building. The one thing that's left off their analysis is that there's a significant rental cost that the town does not incur because the youth services is using the ICC. When they compute the value of the ICC, what it's contributing on an annual basis, they just ignore that. If they weren't there, the town would be spending rental value somewhere else. So it's not a break even on the current ICC. It's not an overwhelming, but a significant profit that the town is taking from it. I hear a lot of scare figures about what they're going to have to spend on the ICC, and from what I've seen, they were going to spend $800,000 about 6 years ago. They never spent it. They have to spend $1.7 million now. They're never going to spend that, and they're not going to spend the $4 million. They'll find something else. They'll make a park out of the ICC building before they spend that kind of money for it, and I would agree with them. But I think it's a false choice to take this one project and compare it to the cost that we're going to have to spend $7 million on the ICC, because we'll never spend it. And I think the last thing, and thank you for all the time you gave me, the parcels of land have all of different values, and I think when you get an analysis of what we are getting and what we are selling, you ought to get it by parcel. And I would question, for instance, does the town need 277A, which the developer paid $900,000 for, and now has to excavate a certain number of feet to get it level with the rest of the parking lot? I don't know if the town's going to end up with that excavation, or we are, or he is. But he already spent $900,000. Do we need those few parking spots that are going to be provided that we should pay for them now on the same square foot basis as we do for the corner of East and Washington Street? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I wonder, just perhaps could I follow up, Nora, with you on a couple of the points Mr. Layton raised relative to the adjustment for the wetlands and also the service cost issue, which I know you've looked at.
So the question of the value of the land, that comes from the appraisal, that we have a draft appraisal, we're waiting for the final appraisal. That does evaluate each lot individually, doesn't give a blanket rate for square footage in Islington. It gives values for each of the lots involved in the process, so that's something that you will have. As far as the, sorry, I just drew a blank. What was
The
it?
service costs.
Service costs. So the service costs are based on 3 students, which is the projection by both the developer's fiscal consultant and the peer review consultant, and based on other experience elsewhere in Massachusetts as well as current experience in Westwood. And it's what we expect would come from 18 condominium units in a development like this, no more than 3 children. So that's the number we gave to the school department, and that's how we came up with the value there. That also includes a value for police and fire associated with the residential properties.
Can I also make a point on the cost for the schools? When you have one student coming in, the cost for the school isn't the 18,000 or whatever we attribute. That's when you take the whole system, the whole cost of the system, and divide it among all of the students. When you have one kid coming in, you're not adding a teacher for that one kid. And in fact, the cost goes down a little bit because now you've got more students. So it's a marginal cost. At some point, if you've got enough students, if you have and you have to add a teacher, then it jumps up. But it's not a cost that goes like that. It kind of goes flat and then it jumps up and goes flat like that. So if it's a really significant project, that's more like a university station. That's more significant. But the only other case is if you've got a special ed student coming in who has a private placement. So 3 students is not that significant.
Other questions or comments from residents? I don't see any. Other questions from FinCom before we close this part of the hearing? I don't think we have any other questions. Thank you all very much. We'll we'll all be finalizing our schedules and posting our meetings accordingly. And so we'll be seeing you again next week. Thank
Sure
you
can hardly wait.
very much. Thank you to everybody for participating. And we will now close.
So I'm sorry,
Actually, strike
Mary
that.
Ann, so did you confirm that we're meeting on the 30th? No. Was that what just kind of happened here?
That's what happened here.
Okay.
That's what happened.
Want to make sure.
And that's the public hearing.
That's
Right,
the hearing.
we will make it a hearing.
No.
So at this point, the hearing portion of tonight's meeting is closed. We're going to resume our voting on other articles that we can do.
Julie, that's for you.
I did. Public hearing.
Karaoke.
I just said for tonight.
I was about to make a
It's not
motion.
finally closed. It will continue. Yeah. Okay, folks, so I think we can continue to vote on the other non-Islington articles, so that when we reconvene on the 30th, we'll be focusing solely on the 3 Islington articles. So, we can get back to our list of articles. We went through 1 through 10, correct, Jane?
We went through 1 through 10.
Okay, and we are, just to be clear, we're skipping over, if you will, 11, 12, and 13, which takes us to Article 14, which is the school borrowing for funding for MSBA eligibility process.
Motion to approve?
And
It's $1.5 million, right? Is that what it is?
$1,700,000.
You have all the language. 1.7.
Should be 1.7.
just to be clear on the record, we've had a motion to approve, and it's been seconded. Is there a point of order?
Oh, thanks.
I don't think that well, anyone need to hear from the planning board? We're saving the zoning article as it pertains to Islington for our next hearing because it's related to the Islington article, so.
That 15?
That is 15. No, excuse me,
13.
I'm sorry, 13.
11, 12, 13.
So 15 is the residential dwelling units?
That's the petitioner article.
Okay, so do we need the planning board for that?
We've already heard from them on it, unless anyone has questions for the planning board. Otherwise, we can.
That's the next article anyhow, right?
We'll get to school next.
Let me ask, and I appreciate your question. Do people anticipate having questions for the planning board? Again, we have fully vetted that one. I don't think so. So thank you for being here. Okay, so continuing on, Article 14, again, school borrowing for funding for MSBA eligibility process. There was a motion to approve, and it's been seconded.
And it's 1.75 million.
Yeah, I just think, given the conversation about $3 million on Islington, that's a sizable amount, you know? So, just something to be aware of as we're talking dollars and figures.
Absolutely. Barb, as a former school committee member, long time, and as chair of our schools subcommittee.
I'm afraid, I don't know if we would ever, if we got invited in and we didn't choose to pass it. Anecdotally, I have an example in Lincoln where they did not approve going into it, and they ended up having to build an elementary school, and they're doing it all on their own with no reimbursement. They chose about 4 years not to go in on it. So, I mean, if we have any chance of wanting to go into this process, and I think, we've tried to look at this process, working with the MSBA is really our best bet, because they're really going to help us focus on what we need. And then, in a sense, the schools are kind of done. So, I think it's something, even if it's to right-size the schools in our declining population, they really need, and I think that's our big investment.
George?
I do have a
Oh,
question.
Peter? George?
If we spend this money and we go through that whole next step, is there a possibility that the state could still say, well, we don't fund your project?
Kind of no. The way that it goes, they have these modules, and they approve you to go to the next module, and this 1.75 will cover the first 4 modules. And basically, they have to agree with what we've come up with, and we work with them, and then they approve it. And they hold your hand the whole way. So it's definitely working together. We never go off on our own. We can't take one step forward ahead of what they want.
They'll tweak it to move you on?
Yeah, they'll look at and they'll say, no, that plan isn't gonna work for us. This is what you have based on all the information they get in.
But there is a possibility that they can say no. I mean, if we don't agree with what their plan is and we put
Yeah,
forward some.
but I mean, I think that, they've been doing this for a while, it's.
I believe it's a very high percentage of towns over the years that if they're accepted in the program, that the projects are seen through the end. And as Barb said, it was Heath's explanation was that there's a ton of back and forth throughout the process, so that as he explained it, there's really no surprises along the way. It's a matter of sort of getting into the game, and then it's a lot of back and forth throughout the process, and things do change, so that if a town were to ask for too much, more than what the state is willing to give, based on the scope based on the scope of the project, then the state will say, well, can we change this or change that, because we don't want to do that. So a lot of back and forth.
Just a follow-up, and this is probably unfair, but we've already, Emily, when she spoke, she said that, okay, well, gone are the days where the state would pay whatever it was, 50-something percent.
Yeah, 59%, yeah.
Yeah. So by the time we get to this school,
Oh, I don't
could
think.
gone are the days where it's 30-something
No, I think
percent?
that this system has been in place and been successful, and it's been sustainable, this time, the way that they've developed it now. So I think the 30% is pretty, that's why they only choose certain schools that come in, they do what they can do. And they have to vote you on each phase, so, they do what they can afford to pay out.
And I know there's a process, but and again, and I think Emily and Heath did a great job, but in light of the conversation over $3 million, we're kind of moving ahead with this. And I know the process about evaluating the schools and being inclusive has been transparent, but I don't think if you ask the average resident that they know we're moving forward with almost $2 million to begin the process to rebuild schools and potentially knock down other schools. So this, if residents weren't comfortable at some part of this process in the future, this money's thrown away.
Well, that's the case at any time we do.
Yeah, no, I know, I'm just stating the obvious,
Yeah,
that this
and the thing
becomes
is,
throwaway money.
Unlike a lot of times when you get development money, you know what the overall plans are, and we don't know what the overall plans
Right.
are. That's the
Right.
one thing, we don't know.
Right.
But, they take into consideration what what the town wants as far as,
Oh, yeah, I'm just saying, there's still a potential that
Yeah.
this will not go forward.
my guess is, and I don't know, my guess is that you'd be able to go forward with something.
Yeah.
A smaller scale. George?
I'm going to vote in favor of this, but it went from 1.5 to 1.750, and to be honest with you, it just seemed like an inordinate amount of money. It's your lottery ticket to go along with the state process.
Right.
And I'm sure a lot of consultants are going to make a lot of money in this, but it's basically the ticket of hoping we can get to a 39% reimbursement. But
30 or 31.
Yeah.
So I mean, to me, I don't think we have much choice. It just
I
still
agree.
seemed like
I'm just
a lot
saying
of
it's a
money
lot
to
of
me.
money.
It is a
It
lot
is.
of
Yeah.
money.
Well, it is, but you're kind of like, you know what you're getting. It brings you all the way up to their
Well, I mean,
fourth
having gone
module.
through 3 or 4 of the major capital products in town, we did not, I mean, design, I mean, there are a series of consultants who are certified by the state who are gonna get paid by this to come in and make our apple nice and shiny and be successful. It just seems like a lot of money, but I think we gotta do it. I think
But
the
more
elementary
so-
schools are struggling, and we gotta solve it. So I'm still gonna vote in favor of it.
I agree with you, George, and, you know, how many meetings have we sat through here over the years where people have come out in throngs in support of our schools, talking about how, you know, Westwood, you know, the benefit we have here is our education system, which is fabulous, but the elementary schools.
If you watch any of those videos.
Pitiful.
Watch any of those
And-
videos.
And it's not just the plant, it affects their education, not having at the Hanlon, you know, a music room, you know, room for art. I mean, it goes on and
Mary
on.
Ann says, you know something, I think at town meeting, whomever writes up this article, we need to be, you know, I'm gonna build upon Mike's, but we need 4 or 5 key bullets of why this needs to happen, because I think we will be asked the question, what are you getting for the $1,750,000? And it's gotta be, look, to go through this process, the following 10 stages, this is what we have to pay for each stage. So I think people will say, okay, I understand what I'm buying.
And one of the differences is you've got the project manager, which unlike the old days when we built a school, in any construction project, you have a project manager, but you get them at the construction point. And now you get them in the very beginning, and they work with you the whole way through.
But I think we just need to show what the breakdown is, the 1,750, so people feel that we vetted it.
It's an investment.
Yeah, oh no, I'm gonna vote for it, so,
Yes.
you know.
But I just think I just think the discussion, given the amount of money,
Yes.
was worth us having. So I just wanted to pause. That's all.
And this, I think we made it clear, the 1.7, it's basically, while our entry to this was through the Hamlin School, it's addressing all 3, Deerfield, Sheehan, and Hamlin, so, and the 1.7, then it kind of looks, you realize that you gotta get.
But Barbara, can I ask you a question on that? I'm not quite sure I understand it. Is it addressing what the needs are of the 3 schools, but it's only gonna, state money's only gonna come in for one of them? That's the part I don't understand.
No, they're gonna look at the overall project, kind of like what we had looked at before, when they had, like, the plans for like 10 different scenarios. Now they're gonna go in and look at our educational
What
needs.
if they come out and say we gotta rebuild all 3 or 4?
I think they would only, something like that, if they wanted us to do more, they'd only do that with, you know, they want to save money, so they're not gonna want to have you build 3 large schools. They're gonna want to, but they're gonna do something that's constructive.
Because Barb, isn't it renovations of other schools? So say if a Super Hanlon is part of the mainstay of the project, but if there's a renovation at Downey, for instance, that's part of the overall plan, because it may affect how much Super Hanlon, you know, it may affect that and so forth. So that's I think.
But are those plans still in effect? Because those were the plans that John Antonucci, in the process he started, only to find out there was a certain process and protocol that wasn't correct. So it's my understanding that those may not be exactly the same plans.
Those were very preliminary plans. They weren't really the plans, I think. that
Right,
were
but I
meeting
think what you're describing is what we all heard. I don't know that going forward it will play out that way. I think that's what will be determined and what these monies are going to pay for.
Right, because as of now, there are no plans. That's
Correct,
to get,
yeah,
right,
right,
it's the 1.7 to get the plans
Correct.
or start the ball rolling.
But may or may not look like previous plans.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the problem, because we're asking people to vote for something that they
Right.
don't know what the results are, as opposed to Islington, where we've got every, you know,
Right.
every
We know what every
dollar,
tree is gonna look
dollar
like.
number, yeah.
Yeah, the magnitude of options here is one of the things that's causing this to be 1.75.
Right.
Yeah.
If this was police station and it's really got to go here,
Yeah.
it's different. So
Yeah.
the magnitude doesn't feel out of bounds to me, given how many options we have.
And I'm writing this thing up, George, so.
Oh, perfect.
Have we,
You want to talk?
have we gotten any kind of indication from the school department as part of this project as to what how the town outreach is going, from a feedback perspective? Because we're certainly gonna hear that at town meeting if, people are unhappy with the project or concerned about it or happy and excited. I mean, I
think that's the vote at town meeting. I think that outreach
But they
has
have been, but they've been doing it all over town.
But they haven't necessarily gotten the feedback. I mean, it's really to educate people for this vote. I don't think I think the other community engagement maybe for our plans that goes further. But I think the outreach now has been really about, gaining support.
So they haven't gotten any feedback at all the meetings that they've held?
Maybe
from the
they
town?
have, but I haven't heard.
But this, the only feedback you could have that would cause you to not vote for this would be, we think everything's perfect. We don't think we need any adjustment to
Yeah.
the school. So almost everybody thinks the schools should at least be studied for sustainability purposes, if not for current usability purposes. I don't think this will be controversy other than the magnitude of it. But even then, so to George's point, maybe Tom, you just gotta say, here's why it costs so much. Maybe we need a little bit more data on that, but.
Well, maybe looking back at some of the other schools and seeing how much,
Yeah.
some of the schools, with the high school, for instance, that would be more equivalent, because the other schools were renovations.
Even that was, let's
But if you
rebuild
had-
this here.
If you had 4 or 5 simple categories, one could be preliminary architectural design,
Yeah.
two could be, whatever it is.
They're based,
student
we did have that, but it's based on, kind of like architects, project manager, more on,
Just something to show you broken it down, so it's not like we're throwing 1750 to a big giant pot.
Well, one other point, though, that Heath wanted to make clear, it's up to 1.75. It's not necessarily a done deal that it's gonna cost that.
Which,
it includes.
Bob, and correct me if I'm wrong, is reimbursable as it gets put into the whole piece, right?
I don't know.
I thought that that's what was stated.
I don't know. I don't know if that gets,
If selected, I thought I remember them saying, if they go forward and they stay we stay as part of the process
maybe
throughout,
that gets reimbursed.
and that gets
30%.
reimbursed, the initial upfront cost.
Probably, because we wrapped into a full bond,
Exactly.
so 30% of it would get reimbursed. But is it to the point of it pays for any environmental costs, like for site testing and that sort of thing too? So it does really bring us right up to the edge of doing a project.
Any further discussion on this one? Okay, so we have a motion to approve. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining? Unanimous vote in favor. The next article, Article 15, this is the petitioner article with respect to the maximum number of residential dwellings in FMUOD 6 and 7. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion. I don't know that I'm gonna get a lot of support for this, but I'm actually in favor of this. So I'm gonna motion to approve the petition article.
Seconded.
There's a motion to approve. It's been seconded. Discussion.
Can you say a little bit more about how you see it as favorable?
Yeah, I'm sensitive to the comments against it where people have said we want to preserve maximum flexibility for the planning board. I think that makes sense in most contexts, to delay development when the planning board, who we're electing to be our eyes and ears on development, I think generally that makes sense. But to me, what we've learned over the last couple of years is that residential housing, particularly in this village, is a massive hot-button issue. The neighbors are honed in, if anything, on the amount of residential units in Islington Center. We might have the same issue if we have a development like that here on High Street. It's traffic, it's school-age children, all that kind of stuff. To me, to have the circuit breaker at 30, where it says, this project that we're working on now, if it gets approved, can go forward, that's fine. For me, I think to the extent that we would come back and suggest that other residential units be put in that MUOD, that would have to be taken to this process and voted on at a town meeting. To me, that feels like an appropriate extra step. It means that we're not going to have a rocket docket through the planning board, and I get that's not going to make everybody happy, but I believe on this issue, it's significant enough that it should go through the town meeting process. And the last two things I'll say about it are, we have 2 town meetings almost all the time now. So we're 6 months away from being able to approve a zoning amendment if Roach Brothers goes away and we want to put 30 new residential units there. We're 6 months away from having a zoning amendment. And to the extent that we question whether we'll actually do that, we had an example of it this year. So we have a project that's been going on for 2.5 years. And one of the things that came up was the size of retail unit that CVS would be. And we had a cap at 10,000. People brought a warrant in front of us to raise it to 15,000. So we do it. We do consider changes. So I think 30 residential units in this village. Anything above that, it wouldn't be a bad idea to bring it to town meeting and through our process. So that's why I'm in favor of this.
I think the threshold is extremely arbitrary. I think the whole purpose of the FOUMD is to encourage consolidated development between commercial and residential. One thing I've learned in this process, you cannot and will not get residential development on its own. And if you look at I'll call the disaster area of in Islington, which is beyond Roach Brothers, where the Army recruiting station is and the old gas station, that's what you're going to end up with. The whole purpose that Nora came and tried to put the 90 was to give some people of assurance when they put these charts up thinking we could have 500 or 600 units in High Street or downtown. The fact is 90 was a rational number. Obviously, Nora, as economic planning director for the town, thought she was going to be basically calming people down, and it turned into a very complex issue. I think if you vote a very arbitrary number like 30, you're basically destroying the concept of the FOUMD. And that you're basically saying that, look, yes, was there opposition to apartments? Yeah, some very negative opposition to apartments. But in the negotiation with the developer, they listened to the community, and it went to condominiums. So it went from 28 apartments to 18 condominiums. They listened to the concerns about the CVS. As part of the process, it ended up going below 10,000 square feet. So in my mind, the process worked. This, to me, is such an arbitrary number. And you had one citizen who basically took all of the work that Nora did, crossed out the word 90 and put out in the word 30. It is an anti-development, anti-apartment, anti-additional residential units coming into this town. And I think if we were to prove this, we are delivering a very, very interesting message that we do not want any kind of affordable housing in this community. And I think it would be absolutely terrible. By the way, if the Islington project doesn't go through, okay, the developer has rights. And my guess is he might even consider a 40B. So I'm just trying to tell you that this is such a narrow number. It's not, to me, a tripwire. Actually, it is a tripwire because it's explosive. And I think you're basically turning the intent of Nora to come up with a rational number to create some comfort to an arbitrary anti-development, anti-apartment, anti-additional housing in Westwood. So I'm strongly opposed to what you're recommending.
And then Mike.
I had a question for Nora. Over the last few years, how many other developers expressed interest in doing development business in Islington?
None.
And so, I thought that the number was really close to zero. There was a lot of talk about what's the value, what's the right purchase price for the developer, and what's the right sales price for the town, and it's economics, it's supply and demand. We're dealing with one buyer, so if the way I see it, and I agree with George, I think if the land was in higher demand, then it would bring a higher price, and so these things I think affect the demand. So I agree. I think that 30 is too restrictive, and I think that again, in the planning board, I still trust in that they'll apply the right restrictions and be thoughtful in their review of plans that are brought before them. But I think that we do our. The other thing too is if this were passed, it's a lot more difficult for that to be changed and reversed. Correct? It requires a higher.
2/3.
It's a 2/3 to reverse that, right?
All zoning by law require 2/3.
So, okay.
And if it went into effect at 30, to undo that is higher? I'm not sure about that. No,
No,
because
it would be the same, oh, the same.
that's what he's asking.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
So it's-
but all, yeah, it would take two-thirds to undo it.
Okay.
Mike?
Yeah, just let me weigh in, because I was struck by the arbitrary number as well. I didn't think there was any basis to it that was being offered by the petitioner. I didn't get a clear sense that what they were saying had value other than they're just trying to limit development. That's all I read between it. Mike, to your point, I agree with you that, you know, putting it out to the town and having the town weigh in on it, I think ultimately we get there anyway, as we see with Islington Station. So, when the Islington Station article is Islington article goes before the town, then that's the opportunity to weigh in. Anything limiting, I think we're just stunting development and not encouraging people outside to come in and do the things that's good for the town.
Yeah, Howard?
Just quickly, I think this is something that's spun out of control. I'll use Nora, I'll use your name, but as a symbol. Nora was trying to do something to clarify things. The only reason this exists is because people are upset, and we thought we put a number on it last year of 90, and that didn't pass, so now someone has seized upon that to make it 30. It just adds to development time. It's another step towards, why don't we say we have a town vote on any new house that's built in the town? We have a planning board, we have zoning, it's all there for the good of the town. The process hasn't shown itself actually to be bad. I just can't see us putting any number. I really was against 90 just because I didn't want any number at all. So making 30, we might have just well say no more development. And I think that's wrong.
Can I just make a point? I did ask the petitioner when she was here how she got to 30. So that question was asked, and she didn't have a method or an explanation for that. So we can go back to the record, but it's more than just our perception of it being arbitrary. She was asked that question, I know that. So that to me lends itself to a level of concern.
Mike?
Yeah, I'll react to some of these things, because first of all, to be clear, I don't think what the petitioner's motivation was has anything to do with what we vote on. So to me, the comments about 30 being arbitrary, I don't know if they were to her or not, but 30 is the number that we're going to end up with if the current project that's on the docket gets approved. So to me, the reason why this petitioner article, if it becomes law, I don't really care what one person's motivation for putting it forward or voting against it is. Does it serve the function that we're hoping for it to serve? For me, I'd almost rather it say, to the extent that we are going to add more residential into an area that we just added 30 residential units to, into a village, heavily trafficked village area. If we are to then add more on top of that, the affected neighbors should have the right to chime in on it. And that's what I'm reading this to say. This is saying that if you want to go above 30, then you've got to come back to us in the 6-month town meeting cycle and ask for our consent to that. And a meaningful number, to Tom's point, 2/3. And it's not just those people, it's the whole town. So if those people say, not in my backyard, the town can still overvote it, because if people care enough about the project, they can vote in favor of it. In terms of 30 being too restrictive, it's no more restrictive than any other bylaw we have. We have 1 million bylaws, and they can all be overturned by a 2/3 vote. It's no more restrictive than that. And then on the sanctity of a FMUOD, I mean, FMUODs are great ideas. We do put them in place to develop, to encourage development. But there's nothing that says that they have to be complete blank checks. We can write an FMUOD bylaw that supports our particular goals. We have the right to do that. And I'm just saying that we've sat here for the last, however long I've been on FinCom, the affected neighbors are always upset about incremental residential in their backyard. So it just seems to me, I'm not sure this is written exactly ideally, but it does seem to me that stop, take a process, ask for a vote, and again, if the affected neighbor's not in my backyard, if they win over the rest of us, great. If they don't, then it goes forward. So it's a 6-month process. It does not kill development. It doesn't kill development. It slows it down.
You have an elected planning board, and they're the ones, we're not elected. And here's the tragedy at town meeting. If we're lucky, there are 11,000 registered voters in this town. if we get 300 or 400 at town meeting, and what can happen at town meeting is you can get a very vocal minority, okay, that can really have a very, very detrimental impact on what goes on. Okay, if you want to write a better article, fine, go ahead and write one and submit it. But this was based on a negative, arbitrarily selected number 30, which the woman could not justify, the petitioner could not justify. It is anti-development, it is anti-apartment, it is anti-having any kind of combination of residential and commercial development come in. You're basically saying that there'll be no more development at all in the rest of Islington.
But
Okay?
you're not saying that.
Yes, you are.
You're
Michael.
mixing the
Let me
message
finish.
with the messenger.
No, no, no. Well, I'm sorry, then why don't you write your own article instead of
I think
relying
hers
on
is
one
written
with an
fine.
arbitrary number?
I think hers is written fine. I think her message behind it are interpreted.
But you know what? You're basically saying that 2/3 of town meeting basically has to approve any development going forward. And that to me is a process of maybe the ultimate democracy, but not, you're basically saying it's a very anti-development proposal you're making.
Right, it's pro-democracy over development, I agree.
No, it's not, because you're not getting, why don't you do with an election then instead of having a town meeting?
Jim has a comment.
I just want to add to Michael's point that before us are some zoning amendments for the developer at Islington. The current zoning did not prohibit him from coming forward and asking to develop, and we're going to change the zoning for him.
He still has a right to, if this gets turned down, which it may well be, he has a right to come in and develop his property, which he's going to do. He's not gonna sit there and let it go vacant.
That's not the result of this petition article being passed. That has nothing to do with this. If all of these things, if any one of these doesn't pass, he has the right to come back and do what he can do. It has nothing
Well,
to do with this.
but you wanna restrict the number of residential units that go forward, so we have 12, so we only can have 18 more residential
George, you're making a lot of good points, but this isn't a good one. This guy's proposal gets him to 30. This guy's proposal is not affected by this petition article, period. The current proposal has nothing to do with this guy's proposal. He gets to 30. That's his
But then
number.
you're saying, but if this goes through, nobody else can come in and develop.
What I'm saying, the next guy through is gonna have to come and ask for
So basically, there'll
town
be
meeting
no,
approval.
and you've heard that you're not gonna get, that there was no development at all in some of the wasteland down the end of the street there. Basically, you're saying that's the way it's gonna be.
I'm saying bring it to
No,
town meeting.
no, because unless it's a combined resident, the whole purpose of the FMUOD in both High Street and down and Washington Street was to encourage some creative ideas of residential along with commercial. Okay, and you're basically saying, no, we don't want to do that anymore. And I think you're trying to
isn't basically what I'm
you're
saying.
usurping the role of the planning board. Okay? I also think this is a restrictive enough. I'm not even sure this thing, you were basically taking away rights of developers today, correct? I mean, this 30 seems to me to be overly restrictive. Anyways, I'm strongly opposed to this. We can vote however you want to vote.
The 30 applies to High Street as well, so it's not just Islington, it's High Street.
Good point. Tom?
Again, the way I see it is that, that over the last few years, we've had one developer come to the table to try to get a deal done, and that's without this restriction of 30. So I think layering an additional restriction on there is only going to, if anything, it's only going to create an additional obstacle for potential developers. So with all of that said, I just think if we all step back and look at the big picture, without this, we've had one player come to the table to try to do a deal, and we still have the other end of Washington Street that has got empty buildings and all that. So I can certainly appreciate the spirit of the article by the petitioner without question. Totally get it, understand the spirit, and applaud her for that. But I just think that I think it's too restrictive, and I think that the nice thing that's come out of the last year or so, or year or two, is all of the conversation and communication between various boards and the town and residents, and all the discussion, and obviously, like Mike said, you know, CVS is an example. This is all an example of the back and forth, and the residents' voices being heard and listened to. And so I think, with all of that, I think that's the landscape that's now created, but I just think it's too restrictive.
Would this at all restrict a developer and put us in a situation for hitting our affordable housing thresholds by having kind of these checkpoints, and a 6-month delay could at some juncture be too long.
Discourage a project from going forward that involves housing. If that's a project that's needed to get us over the threshold, it could put us beyond the point. However, if there's a project that we want to take forward that involves housing, affordable housing, we always have the option of going through the 40B process, which steps aside things like.
But this would work both ways, because it wouldn't affect the denominator.
Right.
If you cap the housing.
I just want to make a point, and I think this is a great and very healthy debate for us to be having. It's really important. I've come to the view that this kind of restriction would discourage development. I'm very concerned about what I consider to be a blighted area south of Roach Brothers. This is where I live. There are abandoned buildings. Kids are getting into them and getting into no good. It's just a sad part of town. And it could be really vibrant. It could really add, if it was revitalized, so much to our community. I don't come up here. I stay down there. That's where I live, and a lot of people live. And it would be really nice to have some great development and options for, housing for folks who, can't spend, $1 million, to buy one of the big houses in Westwood. So I see a restriction like this as really limiting and discouraging development in that part of town, which I would really like to see for residents. So that's where I come from.
Do we vote on what his motion is?
Well, I want to make sure everyone's been heard. And anyone else who wants to weigh in on this?
Just one more thing. I'm certainly not an expert on development, but all I hear is it's, for development, it needs to be mixed use, or that's really the popular thing. And when you take away the residential component, you've effectively taken away almost all development with the way things are being done now with mixed use. So I think it means more than residential is what we're voting on here. So.
And it has to be profitable to the developer. I mean, the one thing is, I think we all would like development to beautify the neighborhood. I think the one thing we're all missing is your backyard from the second floor up would be the train tracks. I think that's just a drawback from any developer's point of view. So regardless of what they want to do with it.
Works in Native Center, beautiful condominiums and apartments have built that look right on the train tracks.
I don't know what rents they're getting or
Well,
what prices
I'm sure
they're
they're,
getting.
but they're
Or if
brand new
they're even
buildings, and they
occupied.
literally, if you go to Natick Center, 2 developments, and they back right onto the train station.
But we're also talking about 109 as well, so this restriction is on 109.
Right, the 109 restriction's a lot smaller than the Washington Street. Washington Street
Yeah.
FEMOD is much larger than Washington Street.
All right, are people ready to vote? Okay, so the motion, just to be clear, is to approve Article 15. So all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
No. Can we get a count? Those in favor, again, were
Just 2.
2? Okay, and opposed? Anyone abstaining? Okay, that motion did not carry. Would someone like to?
Make a motion to indefinitely postpone?
I will second that.
So the motion is to indefinitely postpone Article 15. It's been seconded. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed
Opposed?
Opposed.
or abstaining? Okay, that motion carries.
2 opposed to that.
Yes.
What was the pro? 11?
It would have been 10 in favor. Can I get a hand vote of opposed, just for your opposed? Oh, just 2?
Two.
And then everybody else, okay, it's 10.
10 and 2.
Yeah.
Next, we have Article 16, Road Improvements, Chapter 90 Funds. Is there a motion?
Motion approved?
Second.
There's a motion to approve, it's been seconded. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining? Unanimous vote in favor. Next is Article 17, Town Bylaw Amendment, Placement of Snow and Ice Around Fire Hydrants. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
There's a motion to approve. It's been seconded. Discussion. Howard?
Thank the fire chief for sitting through all this.
And us all shovels.
I think the improvements, thank you for making those changes. I think they're more favorable for the article.
And I noticed on the Westwood newsletter that came out online today, there's a big thing about adopting a fire hydrant.
So you got the conversation going.
Any further discussion on this one? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining? Unanimous vote in favor. Article 18, appropriation for a comprehensive study of security needs for school and municipal buildings. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion to approve, it's been seconded. Any further discussion on this article? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining? Unanimous vote in favor. And lastly, appropriation for affordable housing units. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
I'll second it.
Motion to approve, it's been seconded. Any further discussion on this article? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining? That's a unanimous vote in favor. Okay, just a couple of housekeeping matters, and then we'll be done for the night. So we have 19 articles. We would still like write-ups by this Friday on all that have been voted, which does not include the Islington. We don't have a whole lot of article writers because a lot of the articles went by the boards. I am looking for a volunteer, though, to help George. George is writing up the 3 Islington article write-ups. He always does a fantastic job in his task force work and in writing things up. And I brought this up with him. He would not ask, but I think it would be nice if George could have someone that he could bounce his initial draft off of.
And Chris Pfaff was going to do it.
Chris was
had
going
to resign from FinCom to run for planning board. So
Correct.
Chris was at
I'd be
tandem
happy to
with
do
me.
it, Marion.
Oh, that would be great. Thank you, Jennifer.
Jennifer, thank you. Okay.
Absolutely.
Now, can
Happy to do
Jennifer,
it.
are we allowed, if I do a draft, do I have to send it to Jane and Jane sends it to Jennifer? How does it work? I want to make sure I don't get,
More than
We will
3.
have already
I don't want to go to conflict of
deliberated.
interest here.
Not a majority.
Once we voted,
It's
I don't
more
think-
than 3 is usually
So
the
you and I
rule,
can
isn't it?
I thought the
So once we voted, we're gonna vote on this on Monday night,
Right.
and the vote will be taken, and so,
You can work directly together?
yes,
Yeah.
you can copy me.
Okay, all right, I'll do that.
Yes, that's what we did last year.
I'll draft, I'll send it to you, and I'll copy it.
And then you're good.
That's fine. Thank you, Mary Ann, that'll help getting
Yeah.
a set of eyes on that.
You bet, and Jane will send around the updated list, so you all have it handy, but, so for everything that we've voted, I think 11 or so of them, Jane and I are writing, and there are a few more. If you could please get those write-ups into Jane by Friday, and then she and I will be working on them over the weekend, and then we will plan to meet again April 30th for our final, I promise, hearing of the year. 7:30 here.
It's all booked.
Here, we're all
Of the
set.
year, Marianne? You're promising the last public hearing for the year?
Per year.
Well, this year. This
I was
term.
like, I
I'm
don't
sorry.
think that's actually.
I'm thinking
For
the term.
season,
The
for
Can I
term.
raise one new business
The
item?
season, yes.
I would like to thank you for your role as chair. I was somewhat a little bit saddened to see your announcement. You've been a remarkable chair. I think the meetings have been precise, concise, and I think you've had to handle, in my opinion, some of the more challenging issues we've gone through. So it's been fun working with you. I think it's going to be a loss without you, but thank you for your service to this, to the FinCom and to this town.
I'd like to second that and ask for a vote.
All in favor?
Vote on taking her out
Now,
for a
Mary Ann,
drink.
you've done a nice job. It's been
Thank
Love
you.
to celebrate.
Thank you. And I just, it's been such a pleasure to serve with all of you. I truly believe in this system, the checks and balances that we place on the town, and how committed all of you are, and just the brain power around this table and the debate that we have. I just think this is town government at its best. So thank you. I've learned so much from all of you, so thank you. But you're not done with me yet. I'll see you on April 30th. Thank you very much. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion adjourned.
All in
Motion to-
favor? Aye. Thanks, everybody.
Jeez, Mike, I've never seen you move so fast.
To adjourn?